Hello there, greetings. I'm Jamie Mitchell. Lovely to have you on board for another episode of the Armchair Fan Podcast. Now, normally we chat to student athletes who are smack bang in the middle of their sporting career, but today we're reflecting on the career of former Queensland Firebirds defender Laura Clemesha. We'll check in with Clem to see what life's like in needed retirement and recap her journey with the Birdies that yielded 2 Trans-Tasman Netball titles. Plus, Laura's had quite the study journey here at the University of Queensland, including earning Class 1 honours. She's one smart cookie and an all-round fabulous person, if I do say so myself. Hope you enjoy Laura Clemesha coming up right now on the Armchair Fan Podcast. Nice to see you, Clem.
Thanks, Jamie. It's been a while.
Yeah, we bumped into each other a few times during your journey at UQ, but I haven't seen you since you have retired.
Yes.
So I'm keen to find out what's retirement life like. Are you sitting on the lazy boy feet up? What's it like?
Oh, gosh, I wish I could say that. I'd like a bit more of that, to be honest. It was actually quite funny for me because the weekend that I finished with the Firebirds, the next week I went straight into semester 2 full-time study in my master's degree, and I started working part-time. So it's really been pretty chock-a-block since then. It's been busier, but in a whole different way. And I feel the last 18 months, if anything, I haven't really had a chance to breathe. And that now, as I'm drawing towards the end of my master's degree, I'm starting to get some free time. And it's actually now that I feel like the big transition's going to happen, because I like being busy. I've always been busy, but now is the lull, which I assume most athletes probably experience directly when they finish playing sport.
How long are you thinking about retiring, and at what stage does it start entering your mind?
Well, I retired in 2019, and at the end of the 2018 season, that was when I was wondering if I was going to come back for another one. And I was really umming and ahhing. I was really starting to enjoy what I was studying and that occupational area a lot more, and feeling like that's what I wanted to give a lot more time to. But ultimately, I wasn't sure if I was going to get another contract, and as soon as that contract landed in my inbox, I just knew in my gut. I was like, no, now's not the time to finish. I want to go another season, and I'm so glad I did.
Do you miss netball?
I've got to say I probably don't miss the rigorous discipline required as an elite athlete, the schedule, the wanting to perform and needing to perform every day so that you don't let your teammates down. I was always a very big team person, but I do miss the people more than anything. I think that was one of my favourite parts of my journey, is just the connections you make, and being in a team like that where you see each other every day. It's like no other experience. I think having spoken to other elite athletes, being around a group that know you so intimately and so well, you don't get that in other workplaces. Now that I'm out in the world, I realise it's pretty special. Yeah,
we move on quite quickly, or it might just be professional relationships or whatever it might be. When you did retire, though, did you have a yearning for that sort of high-intensity training that you'd been doing for years and years, or were you able to just turn it right off and relax a bit?
To be honest, I was exhausted.
Yeah.
I was so physically and mentally exhausted from the grind that I just let myself off the hook, which is not something that I'm quite used to. I've always prided myself on being quite a hard trainer, quite disciplined, never miss a session. But I soon realised that the demands of full-time masters, as well as work, which of course I needed to do to support myself, there just aren't enough hours in the day. And I first understood, when people, non-elite athletes talk about where on earth do you fit exercise into the day. For me, I'd been fortunate enough to be paid for it for so long. It was the priority in my day, as opposed to being the thing that could probably slide if need be. So I actually went back to a very chilled out routine of mainly just walking, which was really good for my mental health when I was so slammed and under a high pressure uni situation. And it's just in the last couple of months that I've started weights training and getting back into it again, which I'm really enjoying, but the break was needed.
Let's delve into your uni career a bit later on because, as I mentioned, Class 1 honours. Coming from a man, P's get degrees kind of mentality.
Doors open doors, nothing wrong with that.
Oh, nice one. Let's review your career. So 6 seasons with the Firebirds, so 2013 and then a run from 2015 to 2019 when you retired. you wrote a wonderful article, which I'll refer to quite a bit in today's chat, on the Athlete's Voice website. The article's called The Truth About Coming Out. So we'll speak a little bit about that too, because that was in regards to announcing your sexuality and explaining that in public terms. But you wrote a really interesting insight into debuting with the Firebirds in 2013. He said, I barely said 2 words that first season, which is probably a big surprise for anyone that knows me. And you're really unsure about, do you commit to professional netball when you're playing alongside Laura Geitz, Australian Diamonds captain, once-in-a-generation defender, Claire McMenamin, incredible player, Beck Bully as well, all Diamonds players. Going back to that first year and reflecting on it, what was it like stepping into that environment?
Oh, it was tough, Jamie, but I think I probably made it tougher on myself than it needed to be. I just didn't think I was good enough to be there. I was excited, I was super proud, but not once did I think that I deserved my spot given my ability at the time. And yeah, that was really tough because stepping into that high-performance daily training environment, really difficult, huge adjustment. But that voice of doubt in the back of my mind constantly, just reinforcing every time I missed an intercept or, potentially had a bad training day, I just took that as evidence as, come on, mate, you're not supposed to be here. And so ultimately I sat on the bench for all of that season, rightly so. I mean, you've named the defenders I was behind. I was definitely there for my apprenticeship and I learnt a lot for sure. But funnily enough, when I got the call saying that I wasn't going to be recontracted after that year, the overwhelming feeling I felt was relief, which would probably surprise a lot of people. There was disappointment at all, of course, but mostly just relief that I felt like I could, go back and play to my strengths, which at the time I didn't think was elite netball.
So how do you return to the Firebird circle in that year off? How does that transition work of going out and then back in?
For sure. So Rose Jenke, who was the coach at the time, called me and said, hey, Clem, we've loved having you in the team. You've been a great team player, but we just don't have a spot for you. But I want to keep you in the circle. I want you to go work on your fitness, go work on your strength, and we want to keep bringing you into training. And at the time, I wasn't so sure on that, to be honest. I considered just stopping netball at that point. But then I decided to go back and just play for fun, play for the friendships and the personal connections, which were so important to me. And it just so happened in the course of that year, I played really, really well, played some good netball. And at the end of that season, as it turns out, a contracted player had pulled out of their contract before the season was going to start and I was available. So I was pulled up into that position. And I think I had a different mindset. I had a different mindset of, I'm back here, I've got a second chance, and it's not going to be myself that's going to get in the way of it. If this isn't going to be for me, it's not because I haven't tried and backed myself, which was the key difference.
So 2015 and 16 are consecutive titles for the Firebirds. So you step back in not only to the team, but they're just firing on all cylinders. A couple of questions around those years. Do you remember your first game and the experience of actually getting out there for the first time?
Yeah, so I did have three and a half minutes in my first year of the Firebirds over in New Zealand. We were playing the Tactics and I was so shocked. I got an intercept and that in itself was terrifying, that I can't remember it actually. I've completely blacked it out. It was a bit of a blur. But moving into 2016 is where I started to get a bit more exposure. So in games that we were up by, a significant margin, the coach would throw me on for maybe the last 8 minutes of the game or if I was lucky, the last 12 minutes of the game. And just bit by bit, I started to understand what the speed was like and also understand that I could actually hold my own out there, which was huge evidence for my confidence.
What type of a teammate were you to Laura Geitz, McMenamin, Beck Bully? Did you try and sit under the learning tree a lot? I mean, clearly you're behind them in the pecking order.
Yes.
They are outstanding players, but how are you interacting with them on a daily basis? Are you trying to learn from them? I mean, is it one-on-one coaching, that kind of thing?
I think the one thing about those three that you've just mentioned is their just complete generosity. So they wanted to impart their knowledge as much as I wanted to sponge it all up. So it was really important to me that I had these awesome teachers there to really make the most out of it. And so they were very generous with answering my questions, but also in that elite sport environment, often the coaches want to see the team that they're starting in practice matches, in scrimmage matches. And Geitzy, bless her, would often just look over at me and tag herself out and tag me in to give me an opportunity on that court when necessarily it probably might not have come. So I was really grateful to her and to the others, but they played a huge role in wanting to see me grow as well, which was unreal.
So outstanding players aside, what are the key ingredients that contributed to the Birdies winning back-to-back titles? What are some of the things that made it so special that perhaps people watching from afar wouldn't see?
Oh, it's a really good question. I think one of the things was there was just this complete and utter sense of belief, which was really pushed in a strong part, I think, we had a wonderful strength and conditioning coach those years. His name was Brynley Abad. He's back with the Firebirds now after doing a stint at the Lions and the Reds, so he's very well practiced. And he brought a kind of energy into the Firebirds that was just uncompromising, no excuses, just no doubt that we were going to win, that we could win. And he pushed us physically in the gym, on the conditioning track, to the point where we were just absolutely wrecked. But it really gave us that belief that when we step on the court, there's no one fitter or stronger than us. And in that process, there was so much resilience and depending on your mates and seeing what your mates could do, on that 12th sprint and still make the line, that just gave you the belief that in those clutch moments on the court, you can trust. You can trust that they're going to push it, which I don't think can be underestimated.
Yeah. Do you have any particular standout moments from the two grand finals? Celebration during the game before? I mean, I'm sure it's a blur for anyone going through it.
Yeah, so I spent both of those games on the sidelines, and I just remember it was out at the Boondall Entertainment Centre. We had a crowd of, I think, about 10 or 11,000, and it was so loud, the fans were screaming so much in that fourth quarter that the girls on court couldn't actually hear the whistle. They had to rely on the umpire signals to understand what was going on. Play would often go for 10, 15 seconds before the girls realised, we have to pull it up and go back. And the anecdote afterwards was that the manager of the Brisbane Entertainment Centre had actually brought out this little noise measuring device, which quantified how loud the crowd was, and he said that the crowd in that fourth quarter was as loud at that game as when One Direction walked on the stage a few months earlier.
Wild.
So that just gives you a bit of an indication about the electric environment and something that I'm not sure I'll ever experience again.
So I hope this comes out the right way. I want to get my head around the elements of being a bench player. So obviously you didn't get many opportunities to play, but how do you keep up your optimism, energy levels, try not to get too down, and what can you do when you're not contributing on the court?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jamie, and one that I've thought about a lot throughout my journey. And in retrospect, I mean, I played for 6 seasons. There are at least 14 games in every season, and I think I finished my career with about 30 caps. So the math easily says that I spent more time on the bench than on the court by a long shot. And I think there's so much emphasis placed on, as a bench player, you've got to play your role for the team, be a good teammate. You're still valuable, you're still needed, you need to be ready at any time, which is so true. And I think there are really 2 elements in it for me. One is that fact that you want to keep putting yourself in the best position for selection every time. So for me, that looked like talking to the coaches, figuring out where I needed to be focusing my efforts on, and then working really hard to try and refine those skills. And there's no question that on game day, it's about the team. There's nothing bigger than the team. So that's keeping an eye out on court, trying to give the girls feedback at quarter time, which maybe the coaches have missed or they don't realise because they're on the court playing. It means being outwardly supportive, not sitting on the bench, hunched over, clearly upset that you're not on the court. And now then there's the second thing, which means you've got those emotions. I mean, everyone wants to be on the court. It's important that you contribute at training, at the game, be that team player. But I found for the first couple of years that I really pushed those feelings of disappointment away, thinking that it made me a bad teammate for feeling upset. And you know, it took me a couple of days after each game to really switch back on and be like, all right, new week. And I think that's something that as administrators, coaches might not be taught how to deal with as well. As I'm a psychologist, and as we know, feelings don't go away. You either find a way to constructively deal with them, or they bottle up and they'll end up exploding when you don't want them to. And for me, in those first few years, I definitely didn't deal with them well, and they came out as probably less healthy coping mechanisms for me, which didn't help my netball career or my mental health. And it was in my final few years that I realised I can still rock up, I can be a great team player, I can be positive, I can contribute, I can do everything I can on the day. But then it is so important for me to go home and feel those feelings, feel the disappointment, because I am disappointed. For me, that looked like a few long night walks, a couple of cries, and just talking to people away from the team that I trusted to just let them know how I was feeling. And to me, getting those feelings out just led to a quicker turnaround to be like, all right, that can be true. That can be true that I'm really disappointed. But what's also true is that I care about this team so much and I need to play my role. So it's something I think really important to not deny those feelings for people who aren't getting their opportunity, to find an outlet so that you can back up and do your job.
I had so many follow-up questions, but I think you nailed everything I had there, especially how to deal with it. So I should mention 7 games across 2015 and 16. Then a major moment in your career, and it's Laura Geitz retiring. So that opens the door for you to play the entire season in 2017. Does Geitz give you any parting words about your new role in the team when you step in her shoes?
Oh, look, I'll never forget that after the grand final, we won the grand final, we're drinking champagne in the change rooms at the end, and Geitz stands up, says a few words about how proud she is of everyone, and announces that she's retiring, and everyone just is stunned, absolute stunned mullets, complete silence.
So it wasn't expected?
No, it wasn't. No one knew. Our coach Rose didn't know. And then to follow that, Claire McMenamin, our vice captain, stands up and says that she is also retiring. And I was just sitting there rather, just panic set in, and then the realisation that, this is going to be my chance. And Geitz just said, look, you're ready, Clemmy. This is really exciting. I can't wait to see you go. So there weren't any particular words of wisdom, but just her parting validation, I suppose, that she knew I was ready and that I could do it was really comforting.
There's a lovely quote in the Athlete's Voice article that I mentioned that sums up that season where you played every match in 2017. To play a full season last year, 2017, I just absolutely bloody loved it. I'd imagine what it would be like, but to experience it for myself, the process of putting in all the hard work in the lead up to the game and then actually being able to execute that on court alongside my best mates and getting the result was amazing. It sounds like it blew your mind to finally get there and be a part of the team that you've been trying to contribute so much for years. Are there any particular standouts from that season that stick with you still?
Oh, I think the first game that I started, ran on the court. I had Gabby Simpson, one of my best friends, out in wing defence. So she was our captain and had G'd me up a lot before the game. We were playing Sunshine Coast Lightning. It was their first year in the comp, so it was a very anticipated match. The two Queensland teams matching up against each other for the first time. I was against Caitlin Bassett, Australian captain, so, just a casual opponent for my first outing. And I was terrified, but I also knew that I had nothing to lose. And in that last 2 minutes, we were down by a couple. I managed to go out, get an intercept, tap it back into court, which stopped them from scoring, they would have gone up past our reach, and we ended up tying that game. And just the pride and exhilaration I felt after that was, it's funny. That year, all of our games are 7:45 or 8:45 at night, which is ridiculous. And I spent many many nights up until about 2 or 3 a.m. with Gabby just trying to wind down, and that was one of those nights there wasn't much sleep.
How were you after matches? Was it just that one night, or did it take a few days to sort of decompress? And if you had a bad day on the court, did you take it to heart too much?
Yeah, well, this is something I learned that, again, I hadn't really been told about in that season, is the real trajectory and the roller coaster you go through. The whole week is leading up, adrenaline's pumping to this one pinnacle moment, which is the game. It happens, you get all the adrenaline out, you're physically exhausted, and sports psychologists say there is a natural dip for you to come back down below equilibrium. So the day after the game, you're tired, you're sore, but a lot of people are also like kind of down emotionally. And then it takes you those few days to pick yourself up, and then be ready to then launch into another week of the climb, because you can't stay on top at the peak of the mountain the whole week or you'd be exhausted. So it was an interesting trajectory of getting your body right, having time away from netball to completely refresh and then come back. And whether it was a good game or a bad game, I found that it still pretty much followed that rule.
What was the biggest achievement in your eyes? Was it playing that full season and contributing on court so much, or being a part of the squad that won 2 titles?
Oh, I think it's a tie for me. I think it's the fact that I had that season where I started every game and played in every one. That is just, I'm so glad I had that experience, and that's something I'll remember and be proud of forever. But I think in tandem, the thing I'm most proud of is in the years that followed that experience, guys came back into the squad, and then we had Tara Hinchliffe and Kim Jenner, who are just phenomenal talents who just demanded court time and got it because of their netball prowess, is understanding and being proud of the fact that I have a part to play that isn't necessarily on the court, and that I still have inherent value in the squad and can give so much. And whereas I didn't believe that before I had my season on the court. I thought, I'm not actually contributing unless I'm on that court. I'm helping at training, yes, but I don't feel like I'm really a member of the team. Where it's getting to that point where it's like, there's so much culturally off the court, being there for my teammates, contributing in other ways that I'm actually really proud of, and I can be extremely content and happy with that, even though I'm not getting the court time. So I think it's that shift of perspective and that piece that I'm probably most proud of.
Now in retirement, reflecting on your career and your playing style, what were you strongest at, and perhaps what were the areas on court that you just struggled with to go to that next level? My strong body, my strong, big, tall body was definitely my strength. I matched up really well against tall holding shooters in that I was tough to get over, and I was able to hold my own and push them about a bit, which is really important to make the shooter uncomfortable, to push them into areas that they don't want to be. So that, I think, really probably set me aside from some of the other defenders I played with in the Firebirds. And I've never been the most agile. That has never been my thing. I tried to improve my footwork, and I definitely did. But being able to get around players or get out for that intercept and recover quickly and get backwards was something I was constantly working on till that day I retired. So I want to talk about another major moment in your life and career in 2017. So you took the incredibly brave step of announcing in the Toowoomba Chronicle, so a newspaper that you wrote in a regular column, that's your hometown as well, but you announced publicly that you were gay. Really brave of you to do that. I'd love to hear the lead up to that moment. I guess what spurred it on to make that announcement at such a public forum like that? Yeah,
for sure. Look, 2017, the year in itself, there was a lot happening. That was the year that we had the marriage equality plebiscite in Australia. So my sexuality and the sexuality of queer people everywhere was being actively politicised. It was in the news. People were talking about it with their families over their dinner table as to whether we were going to be allowed to marry or not. So it wasn't something that I could just skirt around. And in the years leading up to that, I mean, I didn't personally know any other queer netballers. Ash Brazel, one of our great Australian netballers, was openly out and had been for many years. And she was just so well respected and liked that there was someone that I could see that, okay, netball's a place for Ash. I'm sure it'll be a place for me too. And I'd been out to all of my Firebirds teammates prior to that. It was just the matter of taking it publicly and I suppose being visible in that I realised was a really important step for me, because if Ash had been my person I could look to and say, I reckon I can be myself and be accepted because look at Ash, she's out doing great things and is widely renowned in the sport, then maybe I can be that person to others coming through the Queensland pathways. And that was important to me. The saying, you can't be what you can't see, I absolutely live that on a daily basis. And the thing I'm probably most grateful for is that over the last few years, since 2017, I've had a handful of young Queenslander netballers come up to me and talk to me about their experiences with their sexuality and thank me for being there to have the conversation with. And that's so special.
That's really sweet, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was keen to find out what that reaction was, but it's certainly been overwhelmingly positive. You had a great line in the Athlete's Voice article, which was a follow-up to this article in the Toowoomba Chronicle. I guess I was just nervous because I'd seen no evidence in our sport. I wasn't sure if it was accepted, although I'd seen no evidence that it wouldn't be either. It was just the fear of the unknown, I suppose. We were talking before we started recording that it's probably a thing that's deeper than a sport situation. It's probably an Australian cultural thing that we don't seem to talk about that stuff. Things are changing, certainly. Have you seen progression on this front change in the last few years?
Look, I think marriage equality, as I spoke about, was such a big moment, defining moment. The fact that by law we are, as queer people, are recognised as having the same rights. You can't underestimate that. But even more so, we're starting to get more representation in our media, whether it's movies, TV shows. I remember when I was 19, I secretly hired all the DVDs of The L Word, which was like a pioneering lesbian sitcom, and I watched them at night under the covers because I wasn't sure if that was okay, and also there was nothing else where I could potentially see myself in. And so the fact that it is there are queer characters celebrated everywhere. There are actors, actresses, sports people that are active role models that people can say, look, society has found a place for these people. They're doing really well. That gives me hope as a young person that I'm going to fit in too. And that's so exciting.
And was it Gabby Simpson, who's a student here at UQ, the first Firebirds player that you confided in? Was that who it was?
Yeah, it's really interesting actually. So I spent a year prior to coming to the Firebirds at the AIS in residence for a year with Gabby, and there were 18 other netballers, all kind of between the age of 17 and 20. We stayed there for the year. We lived together, we trained together, we were best mates. And I was in a relationship at the time with a woman, and I chose not to tell these people who I lived with, breathed with, ate with for the 12 months about that relationship. And in retrospect, I know that it's because I was scared of making them uncomfortable of their reaction. And that really plugs into what society had led me to believe, that I live in a house with these girls, I'm in ice bars with these girls. What are they going to think if I say that I am gay? Are they going to feel uncomfortable, or that potentially I'm thinking of them in a way that might make them uncomfortable? And now there was no evidence of that. But as we talk about, netball, sport is in a society that doesn't talk about, that doesn't normalise queer life, queer relationships. And so I just didn't know what to expect, and it was terrifying, to be honest. And Gabby, once we came to the Firebirds a few months after finishing our AIS stint, we were just chilling out after one of our first games, and she kind of asked me outright about my partner at the time and what our relationship actually was. And it was so special because in telling her, I gave the opportunity for her to be there for me, which is not an opportunity at the time that I gave my other teammates at the AIS, who in retrospect now I have no doubt would have been so accepting and loving and supportive. But it's experiences like that I can look back on in retrospect and realise that I was scared, I was worried, because there was a bit of internalised homophobia even in myself, which you do have to kind of actively fight on a day-to-day basis.
So I'm curious to understand what the feeling is once you've made the announcement and what the sensations are, I guess, when the weight comes off in some aspects. So I'm a heterosexual male. I haven't experienced any of that pressure or stress. When you do come out, is it just less anxious? I mean, what changes, I guess, when you make a monumental thing like that? You talk about being worried. Is it just a huge weight off the shoulders?
It's a weight off your shoulders, but it's also complete terror. Weight off the shoulders in that I could finally be myself, live authentically, reference my girlfriend. If someone asked, what'd you get up to this weekend? I could say, I went to the beach with my girlfriend, as opposed to actively using that mental energy and space to essentially be deceptive. I'm an organisational psychologist in training, and one thing that we know that when people are hiding parts of themselves when they go to work, whether it's their sexuality, their religion, what they like, what they dislike, they're not as happy, they're not as productive, they're not as innovative, they're not as creative, because they're spending so much of their energy actively putting up a front. And that translates wholly to my experience, that once I was just able to be me, I had support from the people around me, it just gives you so much time, energy back to put towards productive things, as opposed to being worried, scared, and pretending. But of course, on the flip side, I was also scared of the reaction, for sure. I actively avoided forums or comment sections that reposted my articles because I didn't want to see something that I was worried about. I did eventually go back and look at the comments from the Toowoomba Chronicle article, and there was a lot of commentary, probably unsurprisingly, given the region in Australia it was published in, about why. Why does this matter? Why is this being shoved in our faces? Let's not make this political. Why do we need to know? And we need to know because it's a part of the story of at least 1 in 10 people in Australia. And by not giving a voice to that, you just reinforce the taboo nature of the subject. So I've been very fortunate. I've had hugely positive reactions from everywhere in my life. But I also know that I'm lucky in that aspect. And it's also possibly because of the size of my profile, and with a bigger profile you get far more commentary. Wow,
you're incredibly brave for doing it, and a champion in this space as well. So good on you for speaking up and spreading the word, and you should be congratulated for that. I just want to touch on that final year of the Firebirds before we do talk a little bit about your study, because you have mentioned how it just intertwines so much in your life, and it has done for quite a while now. So that full season in 2017, and then you mentioned Kim Jenner and Tara Hinchcliffe, again, both students here at UQ. We've got half the squad who are studying at UQ and playing with the Firebirds. But then it was making way for those two players who forced themselves into the starting lineup. Again, another quote in the Athlete's Voice article that you wrote in 2018. It's a different experience being on the bench now, that I know how fantastic it is to be out there, and that really fuels the fire and desire to be back on the court. I know that I can do a solid job if needed. It's just a fantastic defence. I'm just proud to be a part of the team. Was it a major blow to go back to the bench after the highs of 2017?
Yeah, it was hugely disappointing, and something that I had to give a lot of time, energy and space to reconciling with. But what I referenced earlier about the real change in my mindset, understanding that I did have a bigger contribution, more than just being on the court. That was really a year where I was suddenly one of the senior members in the team. So I had all this knowledge about Firebirds culture, how we do things. I was in the player association role where I was really leading and guiding a lot of the reform and movement, and could give advice to my fellow Firebirds. And also people would just come to talk to me about stuff, which I really valued and felt privileged about what they were finding hard about the training environment, about their issues too, and just recognising that a leadership role could really come from the bench was a huge revelation for me. And Kim and Tazi, they helped me through so much, as well as I'd like to think that I helped them. They're just two really great girls who I just feel so privileged to have played with, because they're going to be absolute rock stars. Like, they're going to be the next Diamonds defenders for sure. Kim Jenner is already in the squad, and I'd be surprised if we didn't see her in the team in the next 12 months. And that really helped me make peace too, in the fact that if I can help them in the way that, they're also helping and supporting me, because they knew it was tough on me as well. They were not under any illusions. That's a really exciting part I can play, and I can be really proud of that contribution.
When retirement does come knocking in 2019, was it an emotional lead-up when it finally comes?
I was really lucky in the fact that I'd made that decision at the start of the season before we'd even kicked off. So I knew this was going to be my last everything. This is going to be my last pre-season. This is going to be the last time I was in Sydney.
Don't have to do those like beep tests anymore, all that sort of stuff? Damn
straight. But that was kind of when the times were tough, when the beep test was horrific. What kind of got me through was the fact that, you've just got to suck it up and enjoy the fact that you are sweating it out, killing yourself with your friends, because this isn't going to happen again. You're not going to get another opportunity with this solidarity and support.
And just on that, so you knew that you were going to retire. Was that was it publicly known to the coaching staff?
I told the coaching staff about halfway through the season. We had a break for World Cup, and for me it was just about giving them the maximum amount of time to prepare to fill that spot. And as I said, it was great, because I got to enjoy everything knowing it was my last. So I think you're more present in it. You enjoy it more. You don't take things for granted as much. So I felt really content and happy once the season had finished, knowing that I could close the door somewhat to this hugely important and awesome portion of my life, while being so excited to then getting to lean into my studies, finishing off my degree, and then lean into an area that I'm so passionate about and excited.
Let's talk about that. So you've been studying at university since 2011, long time. First kicked off with a Bachelor of Laws, Bachelor of Arts degree. That was a major in English literature. 2013, you then tackled a Bachelor of Psychological Science. I mentioned previously graduated that with Class 1 Honours. Good on you.
Thanks.
And now you're tearing into a Master of Organisational Psychology. How close are you to finishing that one?
Oh, Jamie, thank you for asking.
Close.
I am 6 weeks out from finishing my requirements of that degree. So I've been doing a prac placement over summer semester, and it's my last hurdle. So I'm almost there.
From talking to you and the dealings I've had over the years, it seems that you've really get a big kick out of studying at uni. Is that what it's like? Oh,
absolutely. I feel so lucky to be able to have found something I'm really passionate about in psychology, and particularly now organisational psychology, because it just complemented so perfectly being in a team environment with the Firebirds and elite sport. Because what else are organisations, workplaces, than just team environments of a different sort? So it's helped me understand so many things about netball. For example, figure out my emotions and how to deal with them better, understanding how you can be an effective leader in a team environment, and how you can empower people, and also reframe your own thoughts when they're not helpful, which will definitely help me get through elite sport.
So in your netball pomp, how were you balancing study with all the demands of professional netball? Was it difficult? How'd you find it?
Halfway through, I made the decision to go part-time, which was a tricky one for me, because I've always considered my strength to be academics as opposed to netball. It was something I didn't have to work as hard at, fortunately. But by going part-time, it did give me the extra bandwidth time to focus on netball, which was the best decision I ever made. And it also meant that I got to enjoy it a lot more and be present for a much greater extent when I was at uni. And it just meant that I had another outlet. I had another thing to pursue that I was passionate about that didn't involve netball and the people there. It was just good to get away, and great too that I had a lot of my fellow teammates who were studying and going through the exact same experience that I was. They got it at assignment time or at assessment time, or when you're just stressed because you've got something due the next day, which was really helpful.
Did you balance netball with study in the sense that you needed a break from either? So I need to go throw a netball around to get away from the books, but I actually need to park that bad performance against the Swifts by reading some books. Was that kind of how it balanced out?
Yeah, for sure. It was so liberating to just get out of one space and get into another and just wholly immerse yourself there, because it's also nice to know as a female athlete, this sport thing, it's not going to set us up for life. So to know too that I was actively working towards the thing I'm going to do for the next, 40, 50 years of my life, that's pretty fantastic too. You've
been a UQ Sporting Scholarship recipient for a number of years. Looking back over the course of your study here, how have you found that it's benefited you trying to balance those dual careers? Oh, it's kind of hard to put into words, really. My first UQ Sports Scholarship was when I wasn't in the Firebirds, when I was representing Queensland at an underage level, but I was trying to train and play netball. And at that level, when you're trying to crack it into the big time, you're actually training far more than you are once you get to the Firebirds, because you're across multiple teams who all have demands. I was also working 20 hours a week at a Mexican restaurant to try and keep the lights on. So there were days, not being hyperbolic, that sports scholarship helped keep my lights on and put food on the table, which is fantastic that those scholarships are targeted not just at the people who make it, who can make some. In the case of the Firebirds, not a whole lot, but enough to get by, but also those who are trying to get there. For not just student athletes, but any student listening trying to balance so many different things, a degree with work, sport, leisure, what's your best advice to keep things on track? How did you do it so well? Yeah, I think first of all, figure out what are the non-negotiables, what can you not compromise? And for a lot of people, I think that's if you're living out of home, you've got to pay the bills. So the time that you need to spend at work to pay the bills, that's probably not something you can compromise. Other people who have support might be able to change that there. From the things that you can't compromise, what's your number one priority? Is it study? Is it your health and fitness? Is it your family relationships? Kind of create a bit of a hierarchy to figure out what is most important, followed by second most important, third most important, and then try and divvy up your time in accordance. You've only got so many hours in the day, and if you're clear on what your priorities are, it makes it easier to understand where you should ideally be spending your time in order to work towards your goals. That was useful for me. Before closing on this UQ chapter, I just want to reflect on your 2011 UQ Blue win. I'm not sure if you know this, Clem, but you were the 13th netballer to win a Blue going back to 1912, so you're an esteemed company there. Gabby Simpson, Kim Jenner, Tara Hinchcliffe also among our Blue winners, so bravo you. What's next? So close to ticking that Masters off. Where are you heading next? What do you like to do? Can't wait. My area of passion professionally is definitely, as might come as no surprise, diversity, equity and inclusion, and how we can help make workplaces somewhere that empower all of their employees, make it a safe and belonging experience for those people who rock up at work, because we spend so much of our time at work. It can either be somewhere where we're able to rock up as our whole selves, and that means we can give more to the organisation and the organisation benefits from that as well, or it can be a less than stellar experience. And I want to try and make it the most fulfilling places by working with leaders and organisations that it can be. Well, good luck. You'll smash it. I've got no doubt. Jamie. And well done on a great Firebirds career. 2 titles, playing professionally. That's nothing to sneeze at. Well done. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for having me. Oh man, I could have chatted to Laura all day. What a wonderful insight into her netball career and journey so far throughout uni. If you enjoyed today's pod or any of our back catalogue episodes, tell a mate or pay it forward with a 5-star review. Ash Hanger is our series producer, and I'm Jamie Mitchell saying catch you later on the Armchair Fan Podcast.